Welcome to the Regenerative Collaborative South Africa. The following is a video segment from January's webinar, From Invasive to Innovate.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'll pull up my slideshow and start to talk about an interesting topic today called mycotexture. We're defining mycotexture as using fungi to shape the built environment. And what you're looking at in the background there as this starts to animate are fungal mycelium. So these are basically the root-like branching hyphae of fungal organisms, and most of the time we think of fungi as producing mushrooms, but that's not always the case. But generally with the hyphae forming fungi, we do get mushrooms. And so there are capabilities of actually making food and buildings at the same time using mycotextural processes. And a project that we did in Namibia is the one that I'm going to focus on today. But we've developed several forms of biotechnology operations for mycotexture that are for, the work we did in Africa was with MIT. And we're developing some materials in Cleveland that are about remediation of the built environment. And we're developing some materials for NASA currently to actually grow buildings off planet. So yes, we got a great introduction to the problem of bush in Southern Africa, but I also want to talk about the problems we deal with in the built environment and architecture generally. I'm an architect, and these are some of the things that I struggle with. The world's building stock will double by 2060. So between 2020 and 2060, imagine every building on the planet today, and then imagine doubling that. So every building that's ever been built will also be built in the next 40 years. It's about 2.5 trillion square feet of building. And put in terms of New York cities, that's like adding another New York City every month for the next 40 years to the planet. So it's a lot of building. On top of that, buildings are responsible for 40% of the world's carbon emissions, with concrete, steel, and aluminum alone responsible for 23% of those emissions. 84% of that is due to the raw extraction of materials. So looking for circular resources could have a huge benefit to mitigating the carbon emissions that come from the building processes. And so that's why I want to introduce mycotexture. And as you saw on the first slide, I'm going to be speaking about mycelium, which is the root-like branching hyphae of the fungal organism. Most people think of them as the roots of mushroom when you first get introduced to them, but it's more proper to think of them as the actual organism and the mushroom as the fruit of that organism, the same way that an apple is a fruit of an apple tree. And so if you can take this fungal mycelium and you compare that with any kind of biogenic plant waste that has cellulose, including invasive species of bush and trees, or the byproduct from agricultural processes like straw or bagasse, you give them time and space to grow, you can have both mushrooms and biomanufactured goods in the same process. So it's kind of a doubling of resources. You could take a waste material and convert that into a couple, or as we'll show probably later, many beneficial outcomes from this process. What we're doing in Namibia, as I mentioned, this was a project sponsored by Standard Bank, which is Africa's largest bank that you all are probably familiar with. They funded a group at MIT who hired Red House. And the premise was, can we turn this encroacher bush into both food and materials to develop a more sustainable housing mechanism for the many people in Namibia that are experiencing homelessness or living in informal settlements, and deal with this problem of the encroacher species in Namibia. So the process basically takes the bush, grinds it up into a pulp, and then uses that as the substrate for growing mushrooms. As you see in the second photo there, we developed these large columns that the mycelium grows within, and then mushrooms fruit from the outside of that column. They're easy to harvest. We take that to market. We sell them as a product, and then the byproduct from that is what we're using to make the building materials. So food is food. Food is sacred. We believe that using the food to feed people is the proper thing. And I'm only emphasizing that because a lot of people look at this and they say you're building houses out of mushrooms, and I just want to correct that precept, because we're using the mushrooms as a food to feed people, and it's the byproduct from the cultivation that are put into these presses that we developed in Namibia, pressed into the blocks as you see there at the end, and then they become multifunctional materials. They're structural, insulative, fire resistant, sound attenuating, and as you'll see here in this slide, we used those blocks to build the world's first structural mycelium building. So there's a lot of biofabrication companies throughout the world that are using mycelium for packaging materials, and in some cases building materials that are for insulation, but this is the first time that a mycelium material has ever been used to be the structure of a building. And this was built in Namibia on our site at MycoHAB, and we used 12 tons of encroacher bush to create this building. In the process, we grew over 3 tons of mushrooms that went to market to feed people, and the whole process actually was carbon negative to the tune of 12 tons of carbon dioxide. And I'll go through the carbon accounting here in a second as well. Here's another slide that shows the site on which we were working on, and the process that goes from bush to buildings with mushrooms in between. Yeah, so here are some of the statistics that I just mentioned. The 12 tons of bush was paired with 100 kilograms of mycelium, 6,000 liters of water, which is, sounds like a lot, but that's actually quite small when it comes to the agricultural process of producing 3 tons of food. Vegetables require much more than that, and of course cattle requires about 100 times that to produce that tonnage of food. And so with those 12 tons of bush, we were able to make 925 myco blocks that went into the construction of this building. There you also see some of the data on the material characteristics. The mass of each block is around 13 kilograms, so it's very similar to a concrete block. These are solid rather than the concrete blocks that are hollow. The compressive strength that we got on the materials there is about 6 megapascals, which is very similar to concrete block as well in Namibia. But just to mention that here in Cleveland, or in our at Red House, where we were able to get that all the way up to 26 megapascals, which is very similar to reinforced concrete or cross-laminated timber, which is a new form of building that's pretty exciting to do high-rise construction. So the compressive strength is basically enough to do a 1-story building in Namibia as we have the processes now, but the technology is such that it could be improved upon to do even high-rise construction in the near future. The organic carbon stored in each block is around 6 kilograms. It's about 43% organic carbon in there. And so when you multiply that by a factor to get the carbon dioxide equivalency, you get 20 kilograms. And I'll go through how that was figured in subsequent slides. But this is just to say that once we net out all of the functions of this, including all of the cultivation and manufacturing operations, when we subtract our carbon footprint, it comes back down to 13 kilograms of carbon dioxide storage. So for every ton of material we make, we're actually storing a ton of carbon dioxide. And this went through proper accounting and looked at double counting, as it was mentioned earlier by Jan, is a major problem with carbon accounting, that sometimes people will count things twice, but we were very clear, and we worked with a group at MIT to develop the criteria on that. And then R value, I'm not sure if that's used in Southern Africa, but that's what we use here in the States to talk about the thermal resistance. And for these blocks, we get about an R19, which is what I would need in Cleveland, Ohio, to insulate a building from our very, very cold winters, which we're experiencing right now. This slide is to demonstrate, just in case you don't understand megapascals and don't know what that means, 6 megapascals and 26 megapascals, a very unscientific test that demonstrate the impact resistance of our mycoblocks compared to concrete. And so, concrete is famously very heavy and brittle, which is a thing that those are aspects you don't want in your buildings when you're talking about seismic loading or lateral loading, things that include buildings knocking together in earthquakes. What you want is a ductile and lightweight material. And so this is kind of just a demonstration to show that. You'll note that we used a concrete block that was hollow core because that's actually how they're made. That's what's used. But we got some pushback from people that said it wasn't fair because this block was hollow where ours is solid. So we had to repeat the demonstration with a solid concrete block. And suffice it to say, very similar results with the myco block. We get a dent and a crack. With the concrete block, we get a shattering effect that could be potentially catastrophic when it comes to building failure.
Thank you for watching this RCSA video segment. Like and subscribe for more inspirational content.